Panelists, to your chairs, please. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming to the first of hopefully many Petrolicious talks. Hopefully you're here because you care about classic cars and not just for the free booze. I'm Afshin Benia, co-founder of Petrolicious. And first I want to thank our friends and partners, Ether, for making this possible. And thanks for their generous letting us use their facility, their beautiful store here for hosting this event. So a big thank you to Ether.
Thank them by buying something.
What's
buy
that?
something.
Please buy something.
That's the real thing.
Yeah.
And it's good stuff, so it's not painful.
Buy at least as much to cover the amount of booze you drink. So today, this evening, we have three brilliant guests.
Stop.
Yeah. They, I guess you could call them entrepreneurs, artists, designers, motorheads, whatever they are. They're fantastic people, and they're making big waves in the automotive industry today. So to my left, we have Rob Dickinson of Singer Vehicle Design. And
hi, guys.
We have Jonathan Ward of Icon.
Howdy.
And Rod Emery of Emery Motorsport.
Hey, guys. And girls.
Having seen the guest list, I think it's pretty safe to say you guys all know who they are. Perhaps we could start with a little bit of background about how you guys got into doing what you're doing. And did you just wake up one day and decide this is what you want to do? Go ahead.
I've been in love with cars since the age of 5. And circumstance took me into the car design business when I was left school. I trained as a car designer at a university in England. I worked for a car company and became absolutely convinced I did not want to be a car designer.
Who'd you
Can
work
we know
for?
what car company that
what
was?
car company?
I used to work for Lotus in Norwich, which is actually where I was born. So it was a local car company to me. And I was given a job by a guy called Peter Stevens, who was the boss of Lotus Design at that time. Peter was this was the late 1980s, so Peter was afterwards was connected with the McLaren F1, and he's a quite fantastic designer. But he gave me a job, and I was working with Simon Cox and Julian Thompson, both of which are some of the most respected car designers on planet Earth. So I got an amazing introduction to what a car designer actually is, and I was adamant I didn't want to be one. And that part of the reason.
What turned you off to it?
Well, nothing turned me off. Unfortunately, I picked up a guitar and at the age of 14, and yeah. So I was in a pop group, and my pop group was doing okay, and we got a record deal, and I was off seeing the world, doing something I thought I wanted to do more. My love of cars maintained through that period, and I think.
Is it safe to say it was a love of cars or a love of Porsches?
No. I'm a serial car nut, but certainly the Porsche, and especially the Porsche 911, has had a pivotal effect on my life for a number of reasons. But you know, I love cars in general, and being in this band took me to California. I remember arriving in California here in 1991 and being taken to for the weekend by one of the executives at our record company to his house in Malibu. And I remember driving up PCH thinking, the weather's fucking awesome, the food's fucking awesome, the girls are fucking awesome, the cars are awesome, the weather's awesome. It was just it hit me like a ton of bricks that I have to live here at some stage. I just fell in love with California big time. And circumstance, fast forward to 2003, circumstance brought me to Los Angeles to make a record. I had some Porsches in England that I sold. That I built in 2003 with some help of some talented friends, a hot rod Porsche 911, which was the genesis of Singer, and that slowly my musical life left me, and my car life entered me again, and it's in a nutshell why I'm here. Yeah. That's my little story.
Very nice.
Guess
Jonathan?
there's a surprising amount of parallels there, except I never knew in the environment that I grew up that, being a car designer was necessarily an option. And I was supposed to be a maritime corporate litigator if I followed in my dad's footsteps. But yeah, that sucked. So I watched my dad doing that and I thought, God, that looks boring. And he's working his ass off. And, to this day, he's there's this vision of security by, following that path and doing what your parents think is right, or being that doctor or that lawyer. And watching my dad, struggle his whole life with a great career in a firm, it just didn't really call to me. And I had a weird combination of circumstances when I was a kid. We lived in the country in remote Maryland, and my parents were, if you ever saw the show Dog Show, that was my reality. My parents were hardcore dog show geeks, and I mean that. And
this is like Best in Show dog show?
Yeah, that's the movie I meant to reference. Thank you. And so growing up as a little kid in that world, a person who bought one of our dogs, whatever, was a senator's wife in D.C., and we were in country in Maryland. And my parents, having grown up in a very small town, thought this is a way for their kids to be exposed to more culture and art than had been offered to them. So I went to D.C. to see Mikhail Baryshnikov in his first U.S. appearance at the Kennedy Center in Don Quixote, and went back afterwards with her and to meet him. And he turned to me very quickly after we met and he said, "Do you dance?" Now keep in mind, this is like 1977 and dudes don't dance, especially in the country in Maryland. So I was already getting kicked out of Little League because I sucked, and getting kicked out of the Cub Scouts because I asked too many questions. And so I turned and I lied. I said, "No, I'm too short." Which turned out to be the wrong thing, apparently, to say to Mikhail Baryshnikov, because he, in turn, it became like his pet project. So next thing I know, I'm training with the Baltimore Repertory Dance Company. And next thing I know, one of the kids who's like really into it is going to New York City. My parents, again, opportunistic for opportunities for us, say, "Hey, go to New York. You've never been to the big city." Went with them for a cattle call to a Broadway show. Got bored, realized anyone could try out, so I had nothing else better to do, so I signed my name onto the list. I copied what everyone else did, and next thing I know, I ended up booking a Broadway show. So my parents, God bless them, were like, "Oh, it's a great opportunity," and Broadway shows, from what research pre-Google they could do, they rarely make it to Broadway, so it'll just be a little summer fun thing. It'll be harmless and good experience. It ended up running for a year and a half on Broadway after a 6-month tour. I did Shakespeare in the Park, blah, blah. It just kept snowballing without any intelligent preconceived plan. And next thing I know, I had a career as a child actor, and it was magnificent. I loved it. Incredible experience. And I was never really a kid's kid, so it was a great opportunity to, if you had the same work ethic and drive and passion as your fellow actors or cast members or orchestra or whatever, you were given that same level of respect. And I really blossomed in that. And then eventually CBS put me under contract moving to California. Got to California, realized, oh shit, the women are hot, the cars are hot, the weather's hot. And wait a minute, did I just hear someone say you get a driver's license at 15 and a half? I ain't leaving. So I stayed here, fell in love with Southern Cal, and career kept going and growing, but I had a stalker that got at first uncomfortable and then soul-searchingly disturbing. And I had to carry concealed for a couple of years, and I wasn't famous. I was teeny bopper.
Finding out a lot about you tonight.
Oh, man. I never tell this story, by the way. This is like the first time I think publicly I've actually brought this rat
This is
out of the
actually about
closet.
personal confessions.
Okay, I did. I always do. But I don't know why. I was inclined to share. So whatever, I'll shut up. Stalker got really, really not cool. Found myself pulling a gun on a production assistant coming to my house to drop off rewrites. And what am I doing? Like, I'm not famous. I have friends that are like legitimately famous and their life sucks. So if that's the end goal in this career, and creatively I got to the point where I had all the things you look to get for, script approval and dailies and casting sit-ins. And a lot of times I put my heart and soul in a project and it still sucked. And worse yet, those were the ones that are still being reran, not the good ones. And I found myself on films on location dealing with the Teamsters, local dudes, finding who's got a cool car. Oh, yeah, so-and-so wants to get himself a new bass boat, and he's got a 34 Ford 3-window coupe he wants to get rid of. So I'd buy it and build it while they're on the film and just loved it. And I trained loosely a little bit, but I've always been artistically inclined, so woodworking and sculpting and pre-Raphaelite painting, oil on wood and stuff. And cars to me were the most interesting, extroverted platform that combined
You're the most
so many
interesting
different...
man in the world. You realize it?
This is the most roundabout way of getting into the car business.
And I
think.
sailed
Totally.
around the world.
So it was like such a cool way to like communicate all the things that I love. And like growing up in New York and being enraptured by antiques and architecture and design details, and I've always been drawn to that and fascinated with decades prior to my own existence. And just started building cars as a hobby, and was in a business class at USC, got into an argument over supply and demand. I said, if you can create the supply, you can create the demand nowadays. It turned into a $1,000 bet, and I had to drive a trackable market up 30 points in 2 quarters. So I had the time and a little bit of cash, and I bought every FJ40 worth of shit in the western U.S. I'd go on road trips, buy them, and then send my friend with his 18-wheeler around after me to bring him up and bring him back to L.A. And I won the bet, but I went back and they wouldn't pay me. So I was pissed. But
Was your professor that wouldn't pay you?
yeah, another student and my professor, the buggers. But always loved traveling. My wife and I were in South Africa for 2 months at that time, and we basically no intelligent pre-thought, no SWOT analysis, no business plan. We just said, look, we're young. We weren't married yet. We don't have kids. She was in music management, which really meant an overpaid babysitter, and she hated it. We decided, what are we doing? Like, let's do something we love, so every day going to work isn't work. We're passionate about it. So we came home, we both quit our jobs, and we opened up the first company, TLC, and then I've just been kind of running ever since. And TLC was all about vintage Land Cruisers, very stoically restored, exactly stock, the good, the bad, and whatever, just only stock. And I kind of got bored and wanted to engage more design and engineering, and then started Icon.
What a story.
Boom.
Thanks.
Are you going to top that one?
Well, my story's a little different. I wasn't a rock star. I wasn't on a Broadway
Either
show.
was I.
But I was kind of born into the automotive world. But grew up right here in Southern California in Tribuco Canyon, kind of a dirt road canyon in Orange County. Best way to kind of describe my upbringing was a combination of Bad News Bears and Dukes of Hazzard. I went to a little elementary school where everybody rode horses and kind of going against the grain. When I was 6 years old, I told my dad I wanted a donkey. So thought it was a great idea. They can haul more weight. But realized real quickly that he didn't like me to ride him to school. I had to drag his ass there. But and when he finally made it to school, I think I was in 2nd grade, he made so much noise that they made me take him home. So I figured out it was pretty easy to get out of school. But really, growing up in the automotive kind of world, my grandfather was a custom car builder here in Burbank. He had a shop called Valley Custom Shop, and he was really one of the pioneers of channeling and sectioning cars. He mastered the art of making a car look a little thinner, a little more streamlined, and doing it kind of old school craftsmanship style. And so fortunately for me, when I was 8, 9, 10 years old, he gifted me with some skills and a bucket of tools, and taught me how to weld and how to bang on cars. And my dad, when he graduated high school, started working at a Porsche dealership and was the parts manager. My dad wasn't really a craftsman, but a really good design guy. And the skills that my grandfather taught me, and then my dad being in the parts business, as a kid, it was like heaven, being able to go to work with my dad and play with life-size Legos, and they were all Porsche parts. And I would basically try to figure out how to plug parts together, and built my first 356 Porsche when I was 14 years old. I started it, and prior to that, though, I had been racing motocross and off-road raced a little buggy. So I was, racing was really kind of my passion. And I built a little 53 Porsche out of a bucket of parts and kind of an old barn find car, and started racing that when I was 16 years old, and really realized the love and I guess what an amazing car Porsche had designed, and a platform that they basically just built and evolved their design on over years. And so I was racing when I graduated high school. I unlike you guys that wanted to come to California, I wanted to get the heck out of here. So I turned 18 years old and was headed to Seattle to go to school. Thought I wanted to be an aerospace engineer, and stopped at Portland Raceway with my truck and my little 53 coupe, and met a guy. Came up to me that saw me race and said, "Man, I would love to learn how to do this." And for me as a kid, I wanted nothing more than to be a professional race car driver. So it was figuring out how I could kind of take that passion and turn it into a business. And my business started in 92, 93. I was 18 years old, and I had a guy come to me and wanted to be a race car driver, and I built a car for him. And I'm still building cars for him 26 years later. So now I was in Oregon until a couple of years ago. I've got a wife and two amazing kids, and so here's my my rock star story. But it's not me, but my son. But he ended up on a Disney show when he was 10 years old, and now he's on the new Fox 24. So he's been in the entertainment business for the last 8 years, and that was the catalyst for me moving my company and my employees and everybody back here to Southern California. So I've been back here in SoCal for a couple of years, and we got a great little shop. Actually, one of my craftsmen, Tanner, is back there. Raise your hand, Tanner. Tanner, bangs on metal in my shop every day, and so yeah.
Does he get up as early as you do?
I don't know. Do you get up as early as me,
This
Tanner?
dude's in this shop like at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's ridiculous.
I love
My
it.
wife does that too. She's in the shop like your hours.
Yeah, I'm there.
But your
yeah.
daughter is also an amazing gymnast.
She is. Yeah, I've got a 14-year-old daughter that trains at Cirque School here in Hollywood. So she is an aerialist. She does aerial trapeze, aerial silks, and hoop. And so both my kids. Yeah, they love what they do, and so Southern California obviously is the perfect place for them in what they do. And my wife, she was born in a little town in southern Utah, so Oregon wasn't that much of a change for her, but Southern California definitely was a little different. But yeah, we love it. I'm back in Southern California, and now I get to interact a little bit more with the automotive community. I mean, I've been building cars. I've built 150 cars, but on my little farm in Oregon. So the reason I was in Oregon, my first customer had a little potato chip company. You guys might have eaten his chips, Kettle potato chips. So when I first met him in 92, it was a little company, and he wanted to go racing, and he was based out of Salem, Oregon. So I planted my roots there and started building cars there, but still building cars for him, but as well as people all over the world. But we're right here in North Hollywood now, so.
Very cool. All very roundabout ways of getting into the business. So obviously there's nothing new about restoration or race preparing cars or resto modding. Calling what you guys do that resto mod or hot rodding would be kind of an insult, but what you guys are doing is really unique in the sense that you're creating a new product that is extremely respectful to the original, to the point that you're exalting the original in many ways and almost making it better than the original. Like Rob, the Singer vehicles, from a distance look like that's what a Porsche should look like, and when you get closer, you realize that there's nothing that's shared with the original 911.
There is a lot that's shared.
It's a travesty. I can't believe you modify these perfect cars.
Yeah. No. I mean, my. It's fascinating hearing these guys' story. I mean, it's. I don't know what. There's obviously some common thread between us. I'm trying to figure out what it is. No. I mean, I had a really interesting and kind of rather blessed introduction to Porsche. I was pretty deep in the Porsche community in England in the 90s, and then of course I suddenly found myself deep in the Porsche community here in California when I moved here, and this car that I was telling you about a little bit earlier became. I joined a group called the R Grouper, which was started by a guy called Freeman Thomas and another guy called Chris Huergas. Freeman Thomas is an ex-Porsche designer and is now head of advanced design at Ford, but very, very inspirational character, very talented designer. And he started this car club for early Porsche 911 guys who wanted to modify their cars, kind of hot rod their cars. And I learned about this club in 2000 or 2001 when I was living in New York. And it was quite alluring to me. I had this vision to build my own little hot rod when I moved to LA in 2003, which I did. Again, the club is the clique and the guys are close together here in LA. Although it's a big town, everyone knows each other, and I was soon in this club and learning a lot and being utterly inspired by these early Porsche 911s that had been messed around with. Some better than others, some with more taste levels than others, and it was clear that there was this massive, wonderful interchangeability of the parts in an air-cooled Porsche 911. And as we're talking about a 37, 38 year period of the car where this car was incrementally changed just a little bit each year, just a little bit. And of course, which means you can put the engine from a 1997, 1998 late air-cooled classic Porsche in a 1964 chassis, basically, if you want to, which is a lot lighter, and so it's the very essence of hot rodding in many ways. And my car was a hot rod in its own way. My car was like an homage to the early racing, late 60s and early 1970s Porsche 911s. But what was interesting to me, I think part of and if anyone's interested in where Singer has come from, Singer. I was living in West Hollywood, making records and trying to be a musician. But I was driving around in what was, putting modesty aside, the coolest car in Hollywood between 2003 and 2006. It was, I got stopped 5 times a day driving around town in that car by lawyers and actors and people who knew what it was but weren't geeks like I was. And
it never got stolen?
Never got stolen. I was at a traffic light once and someone passed a bottle of champagne through the window and said, I'm gonna buy your car. That was a guy a guy called I won't mention his name, who's become a good friend since. So I was in an interesting position. I was in West Hollywood with a bunch of people who knew what a cool car was. Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Rolls Royces, forget about it. Those things don't even bat an eyelid in this town. But an unusual, cool, nicely executed little hot rod, this is something that you guys know very well, turns heads, and my car certainly did that a little bit. And so, but I found myself talking to guys who didn't really know what they were talking about, but they knew. They'd watched the Le Mans movie from 1970. They knew who Steve McQueen was. They knew that it was an old Porsche. They knew that it wasn't a really old Porsche, but a kind of old Porsche, and it was kind of cool, and it was driving around town in the middle of the day, and it wasn't breaking down. And then I was going to this club, the R Group, where we were talking about the weight of screws that held shit together, and we were diving deep into the minutiae of this car. and it became clear that there was commonality between the layman, if you like, and the nerd, and in combination between this and starting to see in this club some very expensive, high dollar. I mean, I built my car on a reasonable shoestring, but we started to see guys coming into the club 2005, 2006, who'd literally spent $100,000, $200,000 for some of the good shops, especially Jeff Gamroth's shop, Rothsport, that we know very well, building beautifully executed hot rods, but done at a shop that done very, very well, not really DIY jobs. And these became inspiring to me, and I thought, and to cut a long story short, by 2008, or 2007 really, I had been gripped, and I've been gripped 2 times in my life, when my band started and when this started, an interesting comparison, by the notion that somewhere in this 37-year history of the air-cooled Porsche 911, there was an ultimate car that you could put, that there was a greatest hits car in there somewhere, something that would, and of course, being exposed to people who had their buttons emotionally pushed by my car here in Hollywood, creative people whose taste maybe you could, I don't know, take seriously, for want of a better term, and guys that knew their 1967 and a half 911s from their 1969 and a half 911s. So I knew that somewhere between those two things was some kind of ultimate incarnation of this car that is beloved by millions of people. And the Porsche 911 is in my view, unarguably the most important sports car in the world for all sorts of reasons. Whether you love it or hate it, it is in my view. And the notion that why don't we try and restore and modify a Porsche 911 in such a way where it has a reasonable claim, and to be some kind of halo of what the air-cooled Porsche 911 era was all about. And of course, part of that, and to getting around to your original question, Afshin, is the authenticity, and the sense that it could not and must not and should not feel like anyone else had done it than Porsche.
But
and that was maybe where we've done things slightly differently to other people that might be in the custom car business or things like that. I'll stop talking now.
No, please. Since Singer, can I call them Singer Porsches, or am I going to get sued? I cannot. Okay. So since Singer vehicles are such a
Either you call them Porsche 911s.
okay, Porsche 911s as interpreted by Singer vehicle design.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, there's such a personal interpretation of your vision. Isn't that correct?
Well, they're not really. I mean, I think the thing that gripped me the most in 2008 was I was absolutely convinced that my sense of what an ultimate 911 should be like was the same as John's and the same as Rod's, the same as everybody's. And this notion and I genuinely thought, if I don't do it quickly, someone else is going to do it, because it's a bloody simple idea and it's really obvious, and there are other people trying to do similar things around the world that were not great. And I knew that if I had the opportunity and someone gave me enough money to build and restore a car the way I wanted it to, something good would lead to it. I had no idea what would happen, but rarely, and I'm an introspective person that thinks that the challenge is everything I think about, but there are a few things where I am uncontrollably driven and nothing gets in my way, and it's happened twice in my life, and this is one of them.
So you're never worried about others not finding your vision of it appealing?
No.
Felt that this was going to be a universally
Well, I don't. No,
Universally
not necessarily.
amongst the Porsche.
I just knew good things would happen. I mean, I think the element of something that's good usually divides opinion.
Yeah.
Except,
Right? And if it's vanilla, it's like, yeah, well, it's kind of okay. And it's not what you want. I mean, if you've got people who love what you do and people who vehemently hate what you do, you're probably onto something. So, So I think that's probably where we're at. Maybe we have more people who like what we do, and I understand how what we do can be offensive to people.
Sure.
You know, we're not taking rare or unusual or mystical Porsche 911s. We're taking, I mean, Porsche made 75,000 964s. So we generally utilize old tired cars that are maybe in their 8th or 9th owner. They've fallen into disrepair, and there's a genuine sense that maybe we offer these cars a second life, right, and imbue them with a huge amount of passion. Our team, our team that in North Hollywood, very close to Rod's shop, builds these cars so beautifully. We've got a couple of guys here from our team as well. Pete and Blas, put your hands up, guys. These are two of our rock stars who help us put these cars together. And of course, we have the Southern California community that where we outsource a lot of our work to. Yeah, I mean it's fascinating and wonderful.
Jonathan, was that kind of the same inspiration for you as well, to kind of create the ultimate FJ or Bronco?
Yeah, I mean, I always had with TLC doing them dead stock, and I was like pretty rude about it. So someone called and say, I want to put a V in it, and I'm like, go away. And we kick them away. Like, no, we only do them dead stock. And then over time, not only did I find that kind of boring and repetitive, but I started looking at kind of backing up, looking bigger picture. Automotive cultures, I think traditionally, once a style is defined, it's almost like everyone falls into a rut. So you're going to build a car. Oh, what are you going to build? Is it pro touring? Is it pro street? Is it hot rod? Is it street rod? Is it rat rod? And there's like all these classifications, which you see in a lot of different art forms as well. But I kind of wanted to call bullshit on that and say, okay, well, the way guys at that time in the early 90s, they were doing V8 conversions, it'd be a 305 from his brother's wrecked El Camino that was behind the garage, and they'd throw it in the truck and they'd leave the 3-speed. So you were really trading evils. So now, yeah, you had a little bit of horsepower, but you had weight issues and you were blowing up drive shafts, or there was a chain reaction that wasn't addressed. So I always wanted to take more of an engineer's approach to that, to which extent I realized you need to take control over the whole platform. It's like doing a house and leaving the chimney versus trying to get away with, handles and HVAC and a skim of paint. And I found it really odd that I was seeing this odd convergence of resources coming together that would make the end product so much better and the business model more feasible than ever in our history. At the same time, I was seeing Bertone and all of these classic custom car houses. They're either gone bankrupt or a shell that's like a think tank for a fresh perspective at a big car company. And even like Zagato nowadays avoids taking commissioned single project cars. They want to do the big production and get their licensing or whatever. But to me, with reverse engineering, low volume manufacturing, I saw this perfect storm of capabilities coming together. Right at the same time that I finished building the prototypes for Toyota of what became the FJ Cruiser. And no disrespect to Toyota, but I saw them taking that in a direction that wasn't what I envisioned. So I went back to Akio Toyota and the board at Toyota and said, I have this idea. My wife came up with the name Icon. And I said, we want to celebrate the history of the Land Cruiser and other marques and never talk about all, these suck, but look how cool ours are. But say that, we're taking inspiration from, the old FJ40s are arguably the purest utilitarian design I've seen in transportation. Every last cage nut and hinge point, everything is so thoroughly thought through. It's phenomenal. So I just wanted to revisit that in a modern context was the whole idea of the brand. My problem became, and like you said, those 2 times in your life, that happens way more often to me, unfortunately. I get a little possessed and monocular. But I got to the point with the Icon FJ40 idea that other than pencil sketches, in my brain was a fully functioning 360 rotatable, zoomable, in-depth CAD model. And I've had this happen several times in my life where something is, I'm obsessing on it to the point that I'm sleeping and I'm dreaming it. My wife wants to kill me. I won't shut up about it. I need to build it. I need to barf out that creation or I'm going to rot. So I just built it. And TLC was going strong enough. I took one key employee and we took a separate little 1,200 square footage area. Didn't tell anyone what we're doing and we just did it. When I was finished, I was stoked and I felt people would definitely appreciate the perspective and what it did. But then I went back and added up what it cost to build and I said, oh shit, this is not going to fly. There's no way in hell people are going to go for this. And I was really, for about 3 months, I was at a standstill and really stressing out. Like, do I not do a marine rated 50-52 aluminum Teflon coated body? Why don't I just do a fiberglass body? Should I not do purpose-built axles down to new castings with proprietary four-wheel disc brakes? Disc brake, drum brake, repurposed Jeep axles, why not? And I couldn't get my head around doing that since I had made a promise to Jamie, my wife, and myself, and that whole point of doing what we were doing in our lives was to keep that purity and that passion and that love for it. So I reached out to a friend of mine that was a lot smarter than me that was literally one of my very first clients at TLC. And he's like a modern brand god in my opinion. And most people don't know his name. His name's Mickey Drexler. And Mickey, I said, dude, what do I do? So I showed him pictures, said, I'm struggling. I got this idea, but shit, it's so expensive. And he goes, you're an idiot. Do what your dream is. You'll build a market and they'll come. And I listened to Mickey. He bought that first one. God bless him. And I just did it. And I've been thrilled beyond my wildest expectation that not only did people embrace it, but they've enabled us culturally to accept no compromise other than the compromises any small business, small volume automotive guy makes, but to constantly push the envelope and make it better and add functionality and add new models. And so, yeah, there's that.
The whole notion of build it and they will come is very romantic, but at the same time it can be very dangerous advice to a lot of people. And with 9 out of 10 startups not making it, what do you think was unique in your situation that the whole no compromise attitude made you successful?
Well, I think I'm going to argue that we all three share it, whether we all realize it individually or not. But we all have imbued our creations with our individual perspectives on utility, functionality, and design, for better or for worse. I would also argue that, and I think I got very lucky I think I was earlier than you two cats in this lunacy, right?
I think Rod is
well, no, you were doing it when I was
1990.
TLC. Yeah, it's about the same with that. But I think we're experiencing kind of a renaissance on the consumer side of people that are tired with conventional luxury or, the veneer of the 2-page shiny ad or the celebrity endorsement. People are calling bullshit. And I think more and more people still, want something that's unique and expresses their personality, their success, their opinion, their locale, whatever it might be. But I think we all owe a great bit to having honored, not because we were, at least in my case, that smart, just I had to create it. So I think by keeping a product that communicated a very specific opinion and passion was the groundwork for us growing, and we're seeing that. And you could argue that with Ether. Who needs another outdoor clothing brand? I mean, you can go to the mall and there's plenty. But it was their passion to say, no, that's not good enough. I want to do it this way. I've got this vision that allowed this brand to exist. And there's a couple guys in the room that I know that have done the same thing, and in furniture and leather goods and on and on and on. I think it's a beautiful time where people are starting to look a little bit deeper and look for products that have more purpose, more longevity, more heart and soul. So I think it was luck of that combination.
And Rod, in your case, your genesis was more kind of collaborative with your clients as opposed to just putting out a product and hoping somebody comes and buys it, correct? Because you were doing things around motorsport and what a client specifically wanted.
Yeah, I mean, really early on, my dad was in the Porsche parts business of selling restoration parts for people that were restoring cars to like full Concours specifications. I mean, in the 80s, it was really, Concours was really becoming a thing. I mean, it did kind of in the 70s, but as the cars, started to show their age and weather, it was really in the 80s when people were, going crazy to overdo the paint and, do everything better than they even were originally. And, as my dad's selling parts to these people, he got kind of, tired of seeing the same cars at the car shows. And I, grew up around that. And in the very back of my dad's parts shop, we had about 1,000 square foot little parts room. And every day after school, I'd be there. And my dad wasn't necessarily a welder or craftsman. He's an idea guy, but not somebody that had his father's skills of fabricating. And fortunately for me, I had been on a drag race team for a couple of years as a kid. I was a top fuel engine mechanic at 12 years old and traveled all over the country. Learned how to machine parts. So I was just, that was my thing. And so my dad would pull a little 356 into the shop and say, Rod, let's trick this thing out. And next thing you know, I'm lowering it and I'm pulling the hubcaps off and polishing the drums with them, and we're putting fog lights on it and hood straps, and all of his customers and everybody around are like, what the heck are you guys doing? And really, we were pulling kind of design cues from what Porsche was doing in the 50s and 60s on their rally cars and race cars. But it's almost like everybody kind of forgot that that's what, Porsches were designed to be, like the people's sports car. It's like the perfect car that you can do anything with. You can put race tires on them. You can drive them to the track and compete and be very competitive in them. And so really, my love for these cars started because I saw that you could just be creative with them and have fun. And it was more driven by just seeing how much faster I could make them. And then when I got my racing license at 16 right here at Willow Springs, I started to see the potential in kind of this little 356. And then, just like you, seeing the interchangeability and the evolution of design from these cars, I was like, why can't I take, brakes from a, newer 911 and put them on a 356? Why can't I take a rear trailing arm from a short wheelbase 911 and modify it and change the transmission and put a 5-speed in a 356? So it was just kind of that evolution of seeing how I could tweak things and make things better. Unfortunately, the races wouldn't allow that type of modification. We had to stay within a certain kind of framework. But my customers that I was building race cars for, like in the 90s, they were like, man, here I'm, winning races in a little vintage 356 with 1600 cc pushrod motor. Can you take a 356 and evolve it a little bit more so I can have that driving experience on the street? Give me more horsepower, make it handle like my, 911 RS. And I was like, absolutely I can. So it was just kind of this continual evolution. And in 1998, so up until 98, I was mostly doing cars that were rally or race inspired. And then in 98, I was freshly married, and my wife and I were like, let's build something that's just going to kind of really throw everybody for a loop. And so I had a really rusty 356 Cabriolet, and I said, I'm going to change every single inch on this car, but do it in a way that people can't necessarily pick out what I was doing. And I'm going to use parts from every year of Porsche that I can possibly find. And so I put rear trailing arms off of a front engine 944 Turbo S. I used big, Brembo calipers off of a Turbo S. I used a 911 transmission. The wheels that I use, you throw them away all the time probably. They're the Space Saver spare.
Yeah, those are cool.
Yeah, I took a Space Saver spare that everybody just kind of like ignored, and I pulled it out. I'm like, that's perfect. It looks like the old Glockler or early Spider wheel. Widened it to a 7. And so it just started kind of taking all these parts and pieces. And I created what I call my Emery Special, which was the first car that I did where I changed every aspect of it. Hooked a little trailer onto it. And my wife and at the time my 3-month-old son and I, right out of the box, the car was done. and we drove it to Monterey with 3 test miles on it to get gas, towing a little camp trailer, and then following that up with a 5,000-mile trip in a 356 towing a camp trailer with my wife and my son.
You
And
still have that car, don't you?
I still have the car, and I have the little camp trailer. And that was kind of that point where everybody's like, wow, these cars really are amazing. But it was an evolution. You know, every part on that car is Porsche. It just came from some different model of Porsche. And that was 98. And ever since then, I've just, you know, I don't really see any boundaries from the standpoint of what parts I can use. You know, right now I'm doing one car that's similar suspension to what you put in the Singer cars. It's all 964 coilover suspension, and it's all-wheel drive. So, you know, it's just taking parts from a 2002 twin turbo and just modifying them and making them work. But all staying true to something that looks and feels as if Porsche did it, because it's all Porsche parts. They're just kind of reconfigured. So.
Very cool. Well, it sounds like all of you are, you enjoy the artistic side of this a lot more. Tell me about the business side. Is that something, tell me about your growing pains and how you've kind of managed to balance the fun stuff with just growing the business, staying profitable, and so forth. Profitable.
I don't know where do we start? When we had, speaking personally, when we started in 2008, I was convinced that Singer Vehicle Design was a design company. That's why we called it Singer Vehicle Design, and that if this idea that we'd dreamt up was going to have any legs, someone else was going to do the work, and I was going to be in a pristine white room with computers, and I kept looking over my shoulder and goes, well, where are they then? Who's going to do this? And there was no one to do it, but so we did it. We had to do it, and we started with 3 of us, and now we have 70 people, and that's just our fabulous team in North Hollywood that just does what we do in North Hollywood. And of course we have 150 vendors and suppliers that do spectacular work to make us look very good. And I spent 7 years of my life driving around Southern California, beating people up, trying to get them to take me seriously, to prioritize our work, my work, so we could slowly restore these cars in a way that I wanted them restored to the quality.
These are probably subcontractors who are doing work for much bigger clients, so you're getting almost no attention.
But at the same time, this is the very reason that we exist as a company, because we are here in Southern California. I've kind of said that. I've heard myself saying this many times. Singer wouldn't exist without California. We are a product of the optimism, the can-do spirit, the car culture, and of course, most importantly, this amazing cottage village industry in Southern California that knows how to do spectacular work because of the car industry, because of the hot rod legacy, because of the aerospace industry. So you've got amazing engineers, you've got amazing mechanical engineers, you've got amazing platers.
But why can't we find a good body shop?
Painters, anodizers, you know, everything is here on our doorstep. We couldn't do what we do. Rod is obviously can do what he does up in Oregon or down here in California, but we need this support network, like we need oxygen of the people that we don't do everything at our shop. Our guys, you know, we take sub-assemblies, we take engines, we take bodywork, we take things, and we make it into a whole. But a lot of that work is done by genius small shop artisans, some bigger than others, and of course, to go to the growing pains, you know, when you know, if a lot of people want what you are offering, and what you are offering is incredibly difficult to produce and makes no business sense whatsoever, to Jonathan's point earlier on, because what we do, I mean, we spend over 4,000 hours doing these cars, and we should be charging twice, literally, I mean literally twice as much as Rod charges properly. We don't. But, the margins are slim in terms of it being a business. And we knew that, and we knew that. And of course, we've got a little bit of traction, as they say now. So we've got maybe more people in the world know who we are now. So there's been a navigation of pragmatism, keeping the quality impeccable, trying to keep the business going when there's, it makes no sense. It makes a bit more sense now because we have more cars commissioned. And then, of course, we have to look to the future and balance that. We have to balance our overheads with the number of guys and girls we have working with us. And how much marketing, I don't use it like that word marketing, but I guess we do some marketing in our own weird way. And it becomes a big balance. And so I find myself becoming miserable. I'm making myself miserable even talking about it. But it's misery for me. It's a bit miserable for me. But what our company has managed to do in the last couple of years is start to hire some talent that has specific abilities in very specific areas. In a sense that we now need to. Literally, we made this up as we started along. When we started with 2 or 3 guys, we were making it up. No, to build cars. To restore and rebuild these cars to such a high degree and such a high standard, again and again and again, there'd been no thought in my mind on how that was going to happen, and no one's written a book about it. Plenty of people. I mean, Rod does 12 cars a year. Our business will not.
How many cars are you guys doing a year?
Well, I think we'll have delivered maybe 25 cars this year, and that needs to. We've got a lot of cars to build now. We have a lot of cars commissioned, and we want to obviously not leave those guys waiting for months and months and months and months. Currently, we're about 18 months from taking a commission to delivering the car, which isn't really where I want it. It would ideally be a little bit shorter than that. And we need to double. We need to do a lot more cars next year, which we will. And we need to have some new ideas, which we do have. We've got a very big idea coming out next year, which I'd love to tell you about, but I can't. But that's going to be a big thing. And we've got our little 5-year plan of what we'd like to do, and we've got, I mean, it's.
You sound very annoyed by all that.
Well, it's like you can't, once the idea is settled, right? This is what to Jonathan's point, you can't get it out of your head, and unfortunately, we're not one-trick ponies, and unfortunately, there's a whole list of stuff that we have to get into. Not that I want to get into, of course, but I use the word "have to" because I know I have to, because that vomiting out your get it out of there. Onto the road kind of thing. There's I empathize with that totally. And there's a bunch of stuff that we want to do that's already done, and it's just a question of executing it and getting it out there and building upon, if we have a reputation, building upon that and proving that the cars can be even better, which they will get better, and trying to figure out that battle between spectacular quality and not having people waiting around for their spectacular quality for too long. Yeah. That's basically the challenge for us.
And Rod, I think you purposely contain your growth, right? You like to keep your team to a limited.
Yeah, I mean, we're a little lower volume just because of the nature of kind of the work we have to do on these cars. The nice thing about, like Rob said, he chose the perfect 911, which it's a galvanized chassis. They held up really well. The 356s that we do 9 356s and 1 911, so we do very few 911s. But the 356s, they just didn't weather the storm quite as well. So there's a lot of rust repair, a lot of sheet metal work that has to be done just to get the foundation back to where we need it, so that we can then start being creative. And so it's a lot of restoration restoration first, and so we have to kind of manage the cars a little bit differently, and keep the volume down, because really for us the challenges, I mean, we all have lots of challenges that we deal with, and for us, we do so much of it in house that it's having the right passionate team players that I can bring in and give them the right tools and the right education and the right environment, so that they can really learn these cars. You can't just pluck somebody out of fabrication school and have them go to work on these cars, because it's all they've got to be artists as well as fabricators, because every shape on a 356 is more of an organic shape than it is a hard line. And so I'm in the shop every day. What I love to do is work on the cars, which is why I get there 2 or 3 hours before everybody else, so I can kind of get going, and when everybody shows up, I can at least know that I at least got 3 hours worth of work done if my phone rings and everybody starts showing up. But I'm in the shop every day so that I can be answering the questions with my guys, and so that does put a limit on the amount of cars that we can do. But just like these guys, you don't want to leave the customers waiting too long. I mean, we're in an instant gratification society. Everybody wants it today, and unfortunately, when you're building cars like we do, every nut, every bolt, every component is restored to as good or better than it was originally, and so it just takes time, and so it's always managing that that expectation of time and the sub trades that we do have to utilize. I mean, we don't do paint in house, so we just, because we don't do enough volume to justify the headaches, the environmental headaches of doing paint. In Oregon, we did everything except for the final assembly on the engine, and that's why we were able to operate, for 20 years on a 50-acre farm with nothing more than UPS as our lifeline. But we did everything in house. A team of 14 guys, and we do 10 cars a year. Here it's a little different. We sub out the paint, which has its challenges, but we do pretty much everything else except for the final assembly on the engine. So it's just managing all that, and dealing with that same desire to want to always be creative, and every one of my cars is completely different than the other one. So from a stylistic point of view, the cars are physically look different, but we have streamlined the running gear and the brakes and the wheels and all the stuff underneath the skin, very similar to what the platforms are that they have, so that we can speed that process up. But yeah, it's just managing the the growth and the availability of talent and passionate guys that and girls that want to get into this type of business, because let's be honest, the schools and really society, although I think that social media has kind of spurred new interest in craftsmanship, we all have the ability to share now.
Thank God.
Yeah.
The criminalization of blue collar is one of the greatest travesties, I think, of our generation that I've witnessed.
Yeah.
We have such a hard time finding talent, and I think
Social
our
media has
government
changed
and
that
our
for us.
educational system has done us all a significant disservice by thinking everyone should fit into a doctor, lawyer, Wall Street sort of silos, and disregarding even, being a plumber. Everyone's like, oh, you're a plumber. Well, there's plenty of plumbers pulling 6, 7 digits who run a good business, and sort of culturally our disengagement with blue collar at large, I think will be our undoing if we do not collectively restore those skill sets and that respect for those skill sets.
Well, yeah, and platforms like Petrolicious, give the viewer, the people out there, the world, a glimpse into what we do, and give us the ability to share that story with people, so that I can, take somebody like Tanner that's here in the audience that grew up in a family that were craftsmen, but making clothing and patterns, but he saw metal as something that he wanted to learn, and reached out to me 5 or 6 years ago because he loved Porsches, and ultimately came on and is one of our metal shapers in the shop. If it wasn't for social media, I don't know that I would have ever had an opportunity to find somebody like him. And in fact, half the guys that work in my shop, people ask what is the characteristic or quality that you're looking for in somebody? Is it education? Really, it's passion and desire for making things in these cars, and the willingness to want to learn, the skill. And social media allows us to kind of, find those people and that we wouldn't normally. You can't put an ad in the newspaper for, to accurately describe what we're looking for, but you post some pictures on Instagram, or a video comes out, and somebody sees that and says, "Man, I would love to use my hands like that," and all of a sudden it's made that blue collar work somewhat glamorous again. Back in the day when these aerospace companies that really built this, the San Fernando Valley, there was real pride in the work that they were building, the stuff they were building, and I feel that, when I walk into Rob's shop and I go and see Chad and see some of the guys, there's true desire and passion for what they're doing. Come into your shop, same thing. The guys that are building these cars with us, because there's a whole team behind each one of us, and every one of them has as much passion and desire as we do. And that's what I love about the business that we're in, is that we give these guys that ability to be creative and do it in such a cool, gratifying way in the end. But
yeah, I find it really cool that use the tools that your grandfather gave you. You want to talk about that real quick?
Yeah. So when I was 8, 9, 10 years old, my grandfather had a body shop, and he has a metal dolly that you put on the backside of a panel and you hammer on the other side. And so when he passed away in 2004, all of his hand tools that he taught me with came into our shop, and now all the guys get to use those each and every day, and it's really it's kind of like the passing of the torch of old school craftsmanship. And we all utilize technology to recreate 3D scanners and 3D printers, but at the end of the day, they're all hand built cars, and we go back to those craftsmanship skills that the grandfathers of the people that are working in our shops, or the fathers, passed on a lot of that skill. So
to wrap up, can you talk a little bit about, Rob, I know you can't talk too much, but can you talk a little bit about some future projects that are coming out?
A little bit, yeah, for sure. We will, Singer will always be Porsche for us. So everything we're going to do is going to be Porsche.
That's all you got?
Any transaxles? Any?
No, I
28s.
there's so much opportunity to within everything that Porsche did, of course. I think I'd certainly say that I think we're scratching the surface of how much we can re-energize maybe the memories and the heritage of the Porsche 911. We're going to be doing that. I can certainly say we're going to be doing that for the next 5 years. And I do feel that every car company, we've been approached by 3 or 4 major car companies to.
Aren't there only 3 or 4 major car companies?
Probably, yeah. It's a good point. Controversial, but good point. To how can we reimagine our heritage? And this is the thing these days. We've got a demographic of young kids who are becoming increasingly disinterested in cars. There's talk of cars driving themselves and talk of electricity and everything else, which is all the march of technology marches on, and standing in the way of it is crazy. But linking these sepia-tinted black and white photographs of guys killing themselves in 1940 and 1950 in old racing cars and making that relevant to people today, I think we're all three of us, all three of our companies are doing that in our own way, making it relevant for the 21st century in some way, and linking that heritage, which is becoming increasingly, it's like looking at pictures of cowboys. Rod has just finished restoring the first Porsche that won Le Mans in 1951. And he's made it sexy, and it's gorgeous, and you see it, and all the skills that his fabulous team put into it. It's relevant. It's 21st century. It's happening right now. It's been used. There's a little bit of technology went into it. A little bit of old school artisanship. Well, a lot of old school artisanship went into it. And what it does, it's a shining light on what Porsche did 60 years ago, and that's. Every major car company needs to get their head around that, and I do think we are providing a service in doing that. And again, as long as it's done with honor and respect and a deep understanding, which I feel we all three of us have, is another thing we have in common, is a deep, passionate understanding of the animal that we're attacking.
And never a single focus group.
No.
Ever.
I think all three of us drive our companies without too much committee.
You can afford one of yours. I can't drive my cars. I get a test drive.
When I say drive, I
company.
mean drive the company.
Oh, the company. Others, you own a singer. I'm impressed.
No. Not yet. Aspiring. But I do think this is important, and I think we've all proved there's a business model here to get nasty and businesslike about it. If you build stuff that is spectacular, and if you stick to your guns, and if you're patient, they will come. And they being the guys that want something special, can obviously usually they have a spending power that we don't all have, for sure, but the opportunity to do something properly spectacular, which usually when it involves cars is unavoidably expensive. And that shouldn't, I think the thing we're proudest of at Singer, and I think both these guys have it too, is that despite the fact that all our collective work is beyond the reach of a lot of people, we have not ostracized ourselves from the grassroots where we came from in terms of the Porsche passion and the passion and the cars that Jonathan deals with. And for me, I'm a grassroots Porsche guy who absolutely cannot afford one of our own cars. But I think, and this is the thing, through the technology of the internet and social media and everything else, we have managed to get our message across in an unfiltered way, without marketing departments, without anything else, with the fabulous support of entities like Petrolicious that tell our story unfiltered, and go and stick a camera in front of Rod as he hammers on metal, and Jonathan and me, and suddenly what we say, I can click a switch now, and hundreds of thousands of people will know something about what I've got to say. It blows my mind, and that has changed everything. It really has changed everything in terms of how people can shoot for the stars, in terms of quality and specialness and unusualness and thinking outside the box. All those cliches, they can actually come to the fore now and have a chance of success. And I think Singer wouldn't be here without the internet and technology. We would no one would know who we were. We've pride ourselves of never having advertised anywhere in our whole life. For me, advertising is an admission of defeat, and we don't advertise, we feel we don't need to advertise, and we shouldn't advertise.
Yeah, you create something spectacular, it tells its own story.
And it's a word of mouth thing, and it's an insiders thing. I think we all have an insiders thing. If you don't know what it is, that's okay.
That's part of the fun, that it's not for everyone.
Just looks like an old SUV or an old 356 or an old 911. That's fantastic. That's success, I think, for all of us. Oh, it's one of those. No, it's like an old Porsche. great. Oh, it's one of those. Hang on, it looks a little bit different, and now it becomes an insider's thing. And I think that's part of the attraction of it. These guys, a lot of our clients have had the usual cars that one might expect in the garage or the collection of someone who's got a bit of money to spend on cars, and they usually get that finger from people in traffic, and with our cars they get that finger, and it's like, wow. And they have to have conversations with people at gas stations, and we've had people follow our clients home over 20 miles just so they can pull up to the driveway and have a chat and take some photographs of the car. It's just
I got the ultimate
fantastic.
story of that. So I was driving one of the derelicts. So we build these cars, if people don't know, but so we have like production models, the FJ, the Thriftmaster, and the Broncos, and then because that wasn't stupid enough, I started doing these complete one-offs that are just all the engineering has to be dealt with on that singular project. But they're called derelicts, and they look like piss, but they really go. And in my own neighborhood, I was driving one of our derelicts recently. It was a 50 Buick Roadmaster convertible, and it's a monster. So I'm going through the crosswalk in Ventura Boulevard, and this old lady starts crossing across the street, like cane in the whole 9 yards, right? And she looks up and she sees the car, and she starts wagging the cane at me and coming at me. And she taps the cane on my door sill, and she goes, "I lost my virginity in that very car," and just turned around smiling and walked away. I was like, that's where it's at. You know, you're not going to get that in a Lamborghini because it's physically impossible. But, so, I mean, the future products, future plans for Icon, I'm honestly feeling like I'm living the dream. I'm very frustrated that I can't seem to get caught up and reduce our fill rates, which are so long now that literally daily I have that business owner's worst nightmare. Someone calls, they're drinking the Kool-Aid, they're ready to go, they want it, they understand the price, they're down, and I go, well, those are sold out until Q2 2019. And in 80% of the time, click, they're gone. So that sucks. But at the same time, I think I feel a responsibility to keep growing the brand, keep communicating our passion, and keep reinventing what we do and how we do it. So like the FJs, like I drove one tonight, that's the prototype of the Gen 3. So it's the third generation that's full of like 4 dozen questions nobody really asked, but stupid ideas. I had to further the religion of what we do. But I don't want to get pigeonholed as the 4x guy. So like most of the one-offs that we do, 90% of them are two-wheel drive, daily driver passenger cars. And I just started our next sort of production Icon model last week. And it'll be 60s, 70s two-wheel drive passenger car. And we're starting to play with more and more electric. We're on our third pure electric platform. And I think that is quite promising. And then I want to take the whole concept of vintage revisited for modern use and apply it to other realms of industrial design. I have no degrees, no authority to be doing what I'm doing, so why can't I do that too? So I'm playing, doing a small furniture effort with my friend Davide, who's here, and I'm a major watch geek, so same kind of kept me up at night design concept for a watch that I need to execute, and hopefully people will buy them. And yeah, that's so.
Very
I want to
cool.
keep spreading out.
Looking forward to that. Rod, any future projects for you?
Yeah, I mean, we 5 years ago, Rob talked about the 51 356 SL that we just restored, which was an amazing project and an honor for me to be able to bring into our shop and have my team work on with me, because it was, in my opinion, one of the most historic Porsches, and a third of the car was erased or cut off and thrown away in 1952. So we had to figure out a way to be able to recreate the 20-25% of the car that didn't exist anymore. And so it pushed me plans or blueprints that were left. We had photographs and we had other examples of cars. So it pushed me to be able to learn new skills and to leverage new technology. And so I got into 3D scanning and 3D design and large format machining and all this other kind of stuff that I had never had access to or played with before. And so 5 years ago, I started kind of digging into that world. So it opened up to kind of my mind to kind of something new, and we've been applying some of that into a few of the cars that we're building right now, where we scanned a 964 portions of a 964 tub and a 356, and figured out where we could blend and merge those components together, and that is now resulted into a 356 that has all-wheel drive running gear, and that comes out of different versions of Porsches, and so by utilizing and leveraging technology a little bit, that stuff that I used to do when I was a kid in my dad's shop of trying to figure out how to plug stuff together, we can speed that process up a little bit more, and look at Porsche's range of components and parts from 1950 to 2017, and say what parts can I plug together to make the cool Lego creation now, and that's when I built my Emery Special in '98. I used parts all the way up to the 964. So to tell you what we've got coming up in the future, most of what we do is 356 based, but I'm not afraid to plug, later model Porsche parts into my, lovely little shapes of 356s. And you'll also see a little bit in the future some influence from my grandfather's stuff, the early Ford custom car stuff. Kind of mingling its way into my shop. But yeah, so Porsches and Fords, but good stuff.
Very cool. I know everyone's anxious to get a drink, but just wanted to give an opportunity to ask any questions from the audience, if there are any. Rob, why do you use the 964 as the platform?
That's a good question. We use it for a very specific reason. It's got 1 foot in 1965 when the Porsche 911 was born. 1964 when the Porsche 911 was born, and 1 foot in the almost in the 21st century. So it's got all the traits of a classic Porsche, old Porsche 911, semi-trailing arm, rear suspension, engine in the back, air-cooled, Porsche 911 shape, but it has a very stiff chassis. It has a chassis that's galvanized. It has a spectacular ABS system on the car. It has a beautiful power steering system on the car. It's just enough relevancy to not. The problem getting an old Porsche 911 that I've owned many of them and I adore is that as we get further into the 21st century, they increasingly feel like antiques, and in many ways that's their charm, that's their pleasure. And the 356, in many ways, I think both me and Rod are making these fabulous old Porsches a little bit more palatable for the 21st century in what we do, but while still keeping the essence of what those original classics were and not diminishing them. And I think the Porsche, the 964 model, which was from 1989 to 1994 technically, is the best mix of old and new that Porsche did themselves. This was a car that took Porsche 6 weeks to build. This is why Porsche were on their knees in the 1990s. And the subsequent car that followed the 964 was the 993, took 2 weeks to build. It was the early sign of resurgence for Porsche, and Porsche slowly dragged themselves out of a difficult situation because they were making hand-built cars. So we are taking hand-built cars.
6 weeks? I'd kill for 6 weeks.
but for an OEM, that's not great to take 6 weeks to build a car. So yeah, it's the perfect platform for us between old and new. Yes. Well, the wheelbase is a little bit different, but the 911 is pretty unique. There are some cars that went through, the Jaguar E-Type went through endless iterations from over about 15, 20 years. Porsche 911 wipes the floor with them from 1964 to 1998. the car had the same drip rail in it, right? I mean, it's unheard of. It's absolutely unheard of. I mean, the Ford Mustang went through iterations, but nothing like this. So yes, so there's a massive amount of commonality, and this was the opportunity for us to do something again that celebrated what I consider the best sports car company, the best car company in the world, which is Porsche. I mean, an unusual company, a Teutonic, conservative, strange in a good way little company that produced this genius of this car as a result of the 356, and it just kept building it and building it, and that's worth celebrating. And that's I like to think people ask what if I'm introducing someone I haven't got a clue what I do. They say, what do you do? I said, well, we celebrate Porsche's heritage, and that's what we try to do. And I think Rod does the same thing. And the 964 is a bloody good place to start.
Any other questions?
Question for Jonathan. Is there any platform as far as like your one-offs that's aside from the Airlink and the Icons? Is there any platform or body style that you just will not touch?
Oh yeah.
Question is there any platform
Yeah.
that you would not touch?
Well, the reality is we build so few, and the brand, from my perspective, so important. To anything that we put out there needs to kind of reflect our passion and DNA. So some cars are structurally prohibitive. So for example, in US manufacture, generally 1937 for most manufacturers is as early as I can go, because earlier than that they were built like boats with a wooden substructure, and then literally this sheet metal is hammer and nailed onto a wooden substructure. So putting 700 horsepower and four-wheel independent suspension under that is not likely to turn out very good. And then stylistically, I mean, I wish we had more time, because this was a question I would have for these dudes. Is it a monarchy, or is it a democracy, or is it a monarchy thinly veiled as a democracy? Because I'll stand up and admit I'm the latter. Because if someone calls and they want to do, I hope no one here, I don't want to pick a car someone owns and piss them off, but like someone they say, oh, I want to do a 69 Camaro, and I want to, it's like, well, it's been done a billion times, and like personally to me, like, you know, the first focus group in automotive was the Edsel, and that didn't work out so good, but they kept doing it. And I think by the time you get into like 63, 64, a lot of the continuity and the designer's vision is so watered down by the pencil pushers and the Wall Street angles of the business that if it's a not a very exciting or unique platform, I'll pass.
You don't like focus groups, do you? Do you remember what Henry Ford said? If I'd have asked the people what they wanted, they'd have asked for faster horses.
You know what's funny? Edsel
That's
told me
such a brilliant
Ford
cuts to the very nub of what you know. You follow your faith, and you follow what's in your
Edsel
heart.
said the correct version of that quote from Henry.
Sure, I screwed it up.
No, you said the one that's publicly acknowledged. Everyone would have wanted a faster horse that doesn't shit, was the rest of what he apparently said. But anyway, so yeah, we try and make it unique platforms that, you know, I'd rather do the wagon or the four-door or something that people haven't seen done already a billion times. And generally I like to stay sort of Korean War back for the most part, because I find the platforms are more honest, and there's more honesty in the materials, and they lend themselves well to what I like to do. But that being said, I got talked into doing a Caprice Classic. Thank you for not calling me out on that. But that we did because it was a great client, and it was an incredible challenge. And the client came to us with a very specific shit list of crazy James Bond content he wanted in the car. Other than that, he said, all right, here's the deal. I've worked with you before. I know what you do. I'll leave you with one mandate and this laundry list of content. The car needs to say, get the out of my lane. And we're like, oh, that's kind of cool. So he then stepped out and let us completely geek out on this car. But that being said, we've had several requests to build more of those, and we're not going to do any more. Because at the end of the day, it was still a plastic, fantastic 90s car. There was like a snap-together kit. No matter how much Corinthian leather and CNC this and that I put on it, there's still a question of the integrity of the base platform and how far I can take that. Cheers.
One last question, if there is any.
Yeah, I'm just curious because there's so much demand for the products that you guys make. Does sourcing these base cars become a problem ever?
Sure, immediately.
Does sourcing the base cars become a problem?
I think we're a victim of our own successes in that, as well as popular culture or generations getting to a point of having emotional relationships with that particular car of that era that they couldn't afford when they were younger, or the girl that got away had, or the cooler guy in school had, or whatever it might be. I mean, when we came out with the Broncos, they were already cool. People dug them. But we won the GQ Car of the Year, which we didn't even know we'd be eligible for. And the demand grew so quick for them that today, yeah, it's a train wreck. It's a train wreck from a couple different angles. I literally am paying triple today what I paid for them 4 years ago. And I get people that are pissed off at me because I made their truck worth too much money.
Yeah.
Jerk.
Rob,
Yeah, I
you're
mean-
certainly guilty of that.
But with
a
the
nice
derelicts,
Explorer.
I pick such weird freaks that that isn't a problem because we're always the target's always moving.
Yeah.
Like we just bought a 35 Auburn, and it's killer. It's a Phaeton, a 4-door convertible, and I'm so excited to get started. But it's this 6-banger. So all of the traditional resto Pebble Beach guys are like, oh, it's not the Lincoln 8, so they wouldn't touch it. Meanwhile, I was thrilled to get it, and the guy who owned the car put like 50 miles a year on it because it sucks to drive.
You know, Rob earlier said something which struck a chord with me because it's kind of how I look at finding cars. You know, we're saving cars that most people would kind of dispose of. You know, like a lot of the cars that we start with are rustier or you know, missing the you know, a lot of components that somebody doing a full Concours restoration wouldn't even consider. You know, it's like when you're doing an original car, you know, everybody wants numbers matching doors and numbers matching engine. And the cars that we're building, same with Singer, you know, we don't have to have that original engine, that original, you know, component, because some of those components we're not going to use. So we take some of those components and help other people do original restorations. And so it's, for me, it's opened up a little bit more of a window for finding cars, because we're not looking for that perfect car. We're looking for the perfect car for us.
I'm surprised. That's cool. Because, like, I think you're probably suffering more what I'm suffering, which is the general popularity of them, and especially these damn auctions. I hate car auctions because suddenly a car is, ooh, it's popular, it's cool. So now here come all of the scoundrels and pirates who will grab a pig out of a ditch, put lipstick on it, and send it off to Barrett Jackson and, you know, watch it bring good money because it's shiny.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, we definitely have to work our butts off to find the cars. But I think the point I was trying to get is that we're saving cars from, you know, being destroyed, you know, or being cut up. You know, years ago, there used to be, you know, boneyards all over the place, you know, with 356s that were cut up into pieces to use that nose panel on this car and the tail panel on this one. And now, because there's some decent you know, restoration panels that are being built by some of the companies, those cars can be saved, and then shops like us, we can make the panels that are missing. And so but we work hard to find cars, and social media has actually helped us in that respect, because you know, people, you know, see, okay, these guys are building cars, and maybe my car isn't, you know, doomed for the crusher, because we can see that they're actually saving them. And the one thing, though, that it keeps us all honest is that, you know, you can find out what these cars are worth. So, you know, I always, you know, somebody will call me and say, oh, you know, I've got this 356, I want to sell it. What's it worth? And, you know, sure, there's always that, you know, you'd love to just say, oh, it's worth $500. But the reality is, I tell them straight up, this is what it's worth. This is what it's worth to me. This is what it's worth if you were to put it on eBay. And you make the choice of, you know, what its fate is. If you want to deal with, you know, 500 Craigslisters, you know, banging on your door to come and look at it, then go that route, and you'll probably, you know, sell it for another $5,000 or $10,000. Or, you know, this is what it's worth to me, and just kind of keeping it real with them. Yeah, I mean, the cars are getting harder to find, but we're utilizing the tools and the resources that are out there and saving cars that would have gone to the crusher.
We have one more question from our friend James here.
Jonathan, I've been to your shop before, very impressive. The FJ4 you built, it seems like you discarded virtually every single piece out of the donor car. I mean, new chassis, new sheet metal, so on and so forth. Why do you even need a donor car? Just the VIN number?
Yeah, there's new laws that promise to make this easier for us. But currently, the only way it can work legally is you bring me an old Land Cruiser, or I sell you an old dilapidated Land Cruiser or Bronco or whatever. But it's specifically with the FJ. I sell it to you as is, beat up condition. Here it's yours. Then you hire me as a shop under the commercial code, under the ICI, to build it to the specifications that you define. As a design geek and engineer geek, I kind of more and more, like, the first 20 or so FJs ran the original ecliptic leaf chassis. And they're great for what they did back then, but for what we're trying to make them do today, the power and, double C channel, they're a little spaghetti when you torque them. But with the leaf spring, Toyota counted on that spaghetti to get the last 10% of flex, just the whole car would flex. Well, now we have the engineering, not we, but we have the ability to do that in the armature, in the coilover suspension, etc. So yeah, it's legal. We have to start with an original car, and I still do have to maintain a percentage of content from that car, which frankly is a pain in our butt, and we do it. Now I've moved forward, and I have 100% engineering control on that and our other two production platforms, where we could create the entire vehicle from scratch. The big limit there, which is really frustrating, is the quality of the aftermarket body assemblies that are available in the market. Unfortunately, the big car companies they'll license anyone whose check don't bounce, and they do zero quality control on their product. They're predominantly just a downright train wreck. Yes, a fender, yes, a floor panel, but you try and use their entire assembly, it's rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. It's just an absolute disaster. So I'm hoping to see the aftermarket industry evolve and for example, grab onto superforming as pioneering, amazing what it can do for our industry, if the right people will come in and make that investment. I'm not that guy because my volume, I can never amortize the development of it. But yeah, there's new federal laws that we worked very hard to get passed, and Obama signed in last year, that will create a new class of ultra-low volume vehicular manufacturers, which potentially could represent a really interesting future for the likes of us. Just we don't know yet, because all the various bureaucracies are still figuring out what will be the process we must follow. So until then, we're just keep doing it the way we're doing it, and I want to go that route long term.
Well, thanks so much, guys. What you guys are doing is truly an inspiration, and I think I speak for everyone that we all wish you a lot of success.
Thank you.
And thanks again to our partner Ether for making this possible and for hosting us here. Thanks so much.
Yeah, very good. Let's get a drink. Let's do it.